We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday said Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire and an end to their 3-year-old war, after holding a call with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up. What a shame that it ever started in the first place.
After the call with Trump, Putin told reporters in Sochi that efforts to end the war were generally on the right track.
Президент Соединенных Штатов высказал свою позицию.
The U.S. president has expressed his position on the ceasefire, and I, for my part, also noted that Russia also favors a peaceful settlement of the Ukrainian crisis. We should simply determine the most effective ways to move toward peace. We agreed with the U.S. president that Russia will suggest and is ready to work with the Ukrainian side on a memorandum on a possible future peace treaty, which defines a number of issues such as the principles of settlement, the terms of a possible peace agreement, and so on, including a possible ceasefire for a certain period of time if the appropriate agreements are reached.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke to Trump one-on-one before the Putin call and then again afterwards in a conversation with other European leaders. He told reporters that he hoped a high-level meeting with Russia, the U.S., and other nations could happen as soon as possible.
We
are considering a meeting of all teams again. We would like it to be at a high level. America, Ukraine, Russia, European countries, and Great Britain. Such a meeting could take place in Turkey, the Vatican, or Switzerland.
Ukraine has said it is ready for a ceasefire now, while Russia has said conditions must be met first. Direct talks last week between Moscow and Kyiv had failed to achieve a truce.
Look, I'd say we're more than open to walking away.
Shortly before the Trump-Putin call, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance told reporters that Washington recognized there was a bit of an impasse.
Look, I think one open question is Vladimir Putin serious about negotiating peace, right? He has made some concessions. He has taken some serious steps in these conversations, but we feel like, we're at a point where we're hitting an impasse, and that's why the president is talking to him on the phone. I think, honestly, that President Putin, he doesn't quite know how to get out of the war.
Trump, who has promised to bring a swift end to Europe's deadliest war since World War II, has repeatedly called for a ceasefire. Putin, whose forces control a fifth of Ukraine and are advancing, has stood firm on his conditions for ending the war, despite public and private pressure from Trump and repeated warnings from European powers.
President Trump spoke with President Putin through the course of a 2-hour call on Monday intended to bring the war in Ukraine to an end or towards an end. Trump said he believes the call went very well. And he said after speaking also with President Zelensky that the two sides had agreed to start negotiations immediately towards a ceasefire and further to bringing the war itself to an end. Trump said that the tone and the spirit of his conversation with Putin were excellent. Trump clearly pushed for this call very impatiently. Putin came on that call while visiting a school in Russia. But haven't we been here before? Trump and Putin had, if we recall, spoken on February the 12th, and that was a call that Trump said was highly productive. Highly productive it was not. Not of peace, not of a ceasefire. Attacks from both sides have now risen about 30% in recent weeks. And after that supposedly highly productive call of February the 12th, things started to go wrong immediately. Trump said he was getting pissed off, his words, with the way things were going or not going. Now Trump sounds excited again. He was pleased enough after this call to brief senior European leaders about the conversation. He said the Vatican could be a possible venue for the new round of peace talks. The view from the Russian side was a little more measured, though for the first time Putin appears, going by these Russian accounts, to have spoken of a need for compromises acceptable to both sides. So indication that Putin may be considering compromises. Putin said the talks were frank, and the fact that they spoke for 2 hours clearly means there were serious differences that had to be negotiated. But going by the Russian account again, Putin said a ceasefire is possible if corresponding agreements are reached. So the Russian account clearly makes progress very conditional. It speaks only of a readiness to work with Ukraine on a memorandum of a possible future peace agreement. That by itself is no guarantee of anything, not necessarily even a promise of anything. A lot will depend upon where, if anywhere, Russia is prepared to make the compromises Putin is said to have spoken of. Russia, of course, is driven by its own exhaustion with the war, and it will now be driven by the temptation of big new trade deals with the US that Trump has held out. Zelensky has said he would like a high-level meeting between Ukraine and Russia that involves also the US, EU and Britain. He clearly does not want just Ukraine and Russia to sit down and talk. But again, whoever is present at the talks and whatever the talks and wherever they are, what they talk about is what will matter. And finally, it will be what Russia may be prepared to give up. And again, one has to add, if anything.